#SAFM Talking Point.
It's a pleasure to have you on the Talking Point this morning. Thank you for all of the engagement that, of course, you've been giving us, the WhatsApp line, the SMS line, on social media. You guys have been so interactive, and it's been really great to be able to have a conversation where, I'm limited in terms of what I know about what's happening in Maludia Pafung, but for many of the residents that have called in and sharing your experience, don't undermine the value of what that can be. So I really appreciate it. We're going to switch gear now and talk about open distance learning. Of course, this is the situation that many institutions of higher learning are going to find themselves in. As the country entered level 4 of the lockdown, there have been concerns about not just reviving the economy, but also reviving education. And the education sector has really been one of the hardest hit. And institutions of higher learning in particular are looking at ways of implementing distance learning. And how easy is it to implement such systems? Well, UNISA, of course, would have the most experience in this department. Professor Makanya, he's the Principal and Vice Chancellor of the University of South Africa. Prof, good morning. Thank you for your time.
Good morning, Katie, as well as our listeners. Thank you very much for being part and parcel of your program.
Of course, you've been the lead of distance learning, not just in South Africa, but also on the continent for years. I wonder, during this lockdown period, have you had other institutions knocking on your door, asking you to teach them what you know?
Yes, Kathy, we've had that experience. The advantage, of course, is that we have a very close relationship with our peers, across the continent and, of course, across the globe. So as and when the COVID-19 hit our shores, then our peers started contacting us, asking what then needs to happen, So because we've always worked together, it was very easy for us, to offer that guidance.
And I want to talk about your own academic calendar at UNISA. How far into the year are you right now?
Cassie, in our case, our calendar is remaining intact, because remember that as a distance education university, that when we had to go through the lockdown, the majority of our students had already received their materials. And of course, the only challenge that the younger generation that use our own facilities across the length and breadth of our country, as well as in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia, could no longer then come to those facilities, which is where the tricky part, in fact, was. But otherwise, they continued to do their work. They submitted their assignments. You'll be surprised that by the end of March, we had received at least 1.1 million assignments. So which tells you that regardless of the fact that students could no longer then access facilities, beyond March and April, that they still continue to do their work. And we've communicated with them, because now they are preparing for exams. We should be starting in the next 2.5 weeks. And they will be doing the examinations, by the way, online as well. So our calendar, therefore, remains intact.
It's interesting that, none of your operations have been affected, because when you talk about being able to run exams in the next couple of weeks, it also means that you're pretty confident that many of your learners will be able to access whatever resources they need to take that exam online. Speak to me about that, because if learners aren't able to move around, to go to a facility where or to some of the venues where they know they'll be able to access computers and have access to the internet, how do you intend on mitigating that?
No, thanks, Kathy. It's slightly complex, because we have to be realistic as well, and accept that not all our students, have access to resources in a similar manner. In the socio-economic environment where we live, you will find that access to these resources is obviously varying, in various degrees, from one sector to the other. So, but be that as it may, we have made it very clear, because it's the first time that our students are going to be exposed to writing exams online. But what we've actually done, considering the understanding that we will be having students who will be having challenges, around having the necessary equipment to do so, that we've developed our own app as a university that we are going to be sharing with all our students as we inform them about the exam preparation, and then using that specific app on their cell phones, they'll then be in a position to link up with the university in a direct sense of the word. And then from that also, we are going to be sending their exam question papers, and they will be getting unique numbers that they will be using to open their own gadgets in order to access the exam questions. And from there, they will then start writing. So which means that they can write anywhere, wherever they are, knowing fully well that some will not necessarily then be having facilities such as laptops that have an equipment such as webcam. We have made arrangements that in such cases, students will be in a position to write as in a normal sense they've been doing in the past, on paper that we have provided them to write assignments on. As soon as they've done so, with that app, they will then be in a position to capture their own exam that they will have written on paper, and then download that, which will then be accessed in a direct sense by the university, because we are going to be marking using JRouter. We're not going to be exchanging paper at any level. So everything is going to be happening online. So we do know that there will be some teething problems here and there, but of course we'll be addressing them. But we made it very clear that students who will be so anxious about that kind of experience will have to then decide whether they will be in a better position perhaps to delay their exams and rather write in October, November. But be that as it may, we are saying that it will be advantageous for students to get through the system, because we are going to be accommodating them as far as we possibly can. We know, for instance, Katie.
Sure,
that,
Prof. Makanya, I'm going to interrupt you a little bit. I'll give you a moment to complete your thought. We just have to take news headlines, and of course, I've also got a few of your students that are getting in touch with us with specific questions for you. So please do stay on the line for us. Utsile, good morning.
The Talking Point with Kathy Motlatlana. Weekdays, 9 a.m. till midday.
We're in conversation with Professor Mandla Makanya. He is the Principal and Vice Chancellor of UNISA. Prof, you were telling us about the amount of innovation that is happening during this time, and interesting, this app that you're talking about, where students will also be able to take their exam. I wonder, what is the risk of cheating that you have made provision for?
Katie, we have indicated to our students that the question of cheating will not be tolerated at all. But in any event, I must say that the manner in which we have developed the current arrangement gives some guarantees that there is a high unlikelihood of students succeeding, even if they try to cheat. Because the manner in which we have prepared these exams is fairly unique. So where students will be getting exams that are tailor-made for them, and in a sense, it is randomized. So which means that there is a high unlikelihood of students thinking that they may be sharing, because the information that I may be having, my next door neighbor might not necessarily be having the similar information. Because as we share that particular exam question paper with each student, it will be picking up from the system which one goes to which student at any given point in time. But we do know that some students may actually like to take a chance, but we want them to say that they shouldn't do that, because we are also going to be doing remote proctoring just to ensure that we avoid that at all costs. But as we rightly know, that in some instances, some will actually try, to take a chance. But we'll pick that up because the manner in which we're going to be handling them is that it will be timed. So if your paper is supposed to be running for 2 hours, it will happen exactly within that particular period. As and when you are supposed to end, it will automatically shut down, and then will give you an opportunity of sorting out the question of the submission, where the uploading then starts taking place. So in that sense, we are going to be putting all the measures in place to ensure that nothing wrong actually happens. And with examiners, we are having our first examiners as well as second examiners from the university for all undergraduate modules. But for those that are at a third year level and for all, postgraduate ones, we not only have internal examiners, we also have external examiners. So the work, once it has been dealt with by our internal examiners, will then find its way to our external examiners. So in that sense, we are guaranteed that the measures that we are putting in place will protect the institution, from those who are looking at making some fast back, using our exams as a platform.
What is the cost of operating a system such as this? And part of the reason why I ask is because it's an added cost for many of those institutions that did not necessarily have all of their resources available online. So for those that have to try and develop capacity during this time, how much would they be looking at budget-wise?
Well, Kathy, it is really fairly steep in terms of the cost because, as you know, technology is fairly expensive. So that's where the challenge really comes in. But I must say that in our country, for a change, because of the post-secondary education sector arrangements that kicked in more or less 3-4 years ago, we've had a situation where much as we are the only dedicated open distance education institution, that all other universities were then given the opportunity to venture into this space. So they began to make investments in the area. Of course, there's still a lot of work to be done because, as I say, it's fairly costly, and particularly when you have to transition from face-to-face teaching into online teaching, it's really not an easy transition, not only on the cost side, but also in terms of your own staff, but also students who obviously are used to a different mode, of teaching and learning. To be suddenly finding themselves in a different mode will obviously raise levels of anxiety on their side.
And I certainly don't want to put you too much on the spot in terms of those costs, but and you don't have to give us the exact numbers, but what are the kind of monies we're talking about? Is it under 100 million rand? How much would institutions be looking at? And part of the reason why I ask this is because, of course, if institutions are not able to fully take on that cost, we're likely to see it being passed on to their students.
Well, Kathy, what we have done from the side of the higher education sector is that understanding clearly the cost implications of this transition, that our ministry and the Department of Higher Education and Training have clearly understood that there will be a huge cost implication in this instance. And for that reason have made arrangements that they will assist the universities in making this transition. So the costs as such are going to be then coming from their side. Okay. So the extent to which then they will manage, to cover all universities in a manner where they will operate comfortably is something that we are looking forward to. But we do know that the ministry has been working very hard over the last few weeks in order to be guaranteed that universities don't struggle to make this transition.
All right. We're going to be taking a couple of voice notes. Some of them are from some of your students, Professor Makanya. But before we do that, there's, of course, the question of data. What happens when a student runs out of data during the exam and somebody else wants to know, will people be penalized for not finishing the exam on time, especially those that can't type as fast as others?
Yes, Kathy, we have taken that into account. And for that reason, the paper, for instance, that under normal circumstances will have taken 2 hours to write, we've added time in order to accommodate students. So instead of 2 hours, we've pushed some papers up to about 45 minutes, others up to an hour or so, just to be guaranteed that students don't struggle, to finish writing their exams. And we've also taken into account that some of our students are using Braille, so in that instance, we've added even more time in such cases in order to be guaranteed that students don't struggle unnecessarily. And we do know that there will be cases where students will not have completed their work because they will be struggling, of course, to type. But we are taking an advantage in our case as UNISA of the fact that if they have succeeded to submit assignments online, then it means that in a way they have actually begun to venture into that space. So they will not necessarily be coming into the environment where they've never been exposed to at all.
And data?
With the data, Katie, let me say we have understood that students will actually struggle in this case. We've spent so much time to reflect on what needs to be done, and we've realized that we have to take the responsibility as a university to extend our own resources to students, particularly those that are catered for by NSFAS, because we know that they are in the quantile that is supposed to be covered in any event. So we are working on that. We have computed the figures that are required, so we know the kind of millions that we have to spend in this regard. So we are going to be taking that matter for support and approval by our own council. We know that we are not going to be having a council meeting soon, but we are going to be asking the Executive Committee of Council to approve that we actually venture into that spending, because we want to cover our students with data during May and June so that they don't struggle to write their exams.
Fantastic. We're going to take a couple of voice notes, Professor Makanya, and then I will give it back to you.
Thank you so much, Kathy.
Hi, Kathy. You're speaking to Lindiwe from Limpopo. I'm listening to Professor talking about UNISA exams and all that. It's really tough for some of us. I'm at home because of lockdown. I'm not going to work. I can't go to UNISA facilities to connect from their facilities, right? And some of my assignments I haven't submitted because I've got a challenge when it comes to data and how to use their systems online, because I'm used to doing things manual. Like, I'm so behind with everything. The only thing that I'm doing right now is reading my manuals, and then that's all. So I don't see how it's going to be possible for some of us to write exams if we couldn't even submit assignments.
Good morning, Sis Kathy. This is Mzokolo Tupo from Durban. I'm a former student of UNISA, and I am humbly asking for his intervention in the problem that I have. I was a Funza Lushaka student in 2019, and I completed my degree. Now, I have never received my placement letter that is supposed to assist me when I'm looking for a job. I sent several emails to the office that is supposed to help me even before the lockdown, but there is no response until today. Thank you so much.
KV, thank you very much. I just want to know from Professor what's going to happen with us, especially students with disabilities, because I'm one of them. And as we speak, I don't have assistive devices yet. I did submit their request, but unfortunately lockdown came. So we heavily rely on disability unit at UNISA, which is based in Pretoria. So I'm worried when I'm hearing now that we are going to write the exams online, because even for myself, even to submit the assignment, I struggle. I have to depend on other individuals because now I am visually impaired. So I think and I wish they would consider that while they are doing this thing of online. Yeah, because not all of us is going to be easy. Yeah, thank you very much.
Good morning. I heard you ask the Vice Chancellor the question of cheating. My question is, are the exams gonna be an open book, or how are they gonna see if you're not copying? Besides the issue of sharing with other students, but let's say I'm alone in my room, how are they gonna see if I'm not copying on my books and so forth?
All right, so those are some of the questions that you've been posing to us. Professor Makanya, do you want to tackle them?
No, thank you very much, Katie. We are very sensitive, by the way, to the plight of our own students. I mean, our student from Limpopo, for instance, has made it very clear that since lockdown, they have not been in a position to access our facilities where they actually succeed to do their studies. That we understand very clearly. But she was then also saying that because of that, she also fell behind in terms of the work that was required, i.e. submission of assignments and so on and so forth. And therefore, to be expected, to be ready to write exams will be a huge ask, from our side. So we are sensitive to that, and I just want to say to our students that we obviously have made a very clear indication that in such instances, we still want to ask our students, as and when they can afford, to write these assignments and send them through, because we are now going to be sending out this, rather covering them with data just to ensure that they can do their work. But if for that reason the student feels very strongly that I will not be ready to write, that we get that information, because we have decided that for this examination in particular, we are not going to be hard and fast in terms of insisting that students must have an exam entry in order to write. We then said all students will qualify to write exams. For those who then will not succeed to sit for their examination this time around, that they will automatically then be doing them in the second semester. That will also not affect them, by the way, in the registering for their second semester. So which means that we are not going to be saying that because you've not made it in these modules of the first semester of 2020, you don't qualify to register for the second semester. That we are going to be putting aside, because we are trying to accommodate them. And then in the case of one of our students from Devon who indicated that he has completed his teaching qualification and is covered by Funza Lushaka, and was trying to gather information from the university, that attests to the fact that he has completed, so that he can then seek employment. That I assume, Katie, you can provide us with the details of such a student, so that that information can be provided. We do know that in some instances, students have been struggling, to get information from staff, although we know that we have been working online full-time. I mean, we've not closed at all since we went on to lockdown. But there are some instances where cases have fallen by the wayside. So we still want to take them up and support our students. And then with the student who mentioned the challenge of them having a disability, that they obviously get support from our ARC suite section of the university, which is dedicated to support our students with disabilities. We have to take that matter up as well as a unique case, because you have heard me mentioning that we know we are going to be accommodating such students in terms of time and so on and so forth. But in instances where they don't necessarily have the assistive devices that will help them to be in a position to write, that we'll have to accommodate them as a special arrangement as well, so that they don't simply just pushed aside. So we'll gather that information as well. So there is a lot that we're going to be doing between now and July in ensuring that the students that may have had different types of challenges insofar as doing their examinations have to be accommodated so that they don't simply just find that the institution has been insensitive in their unique cases. And then there was a question, Casey, on how are we going to understand the question of cheating in a situation where a student is sitting out there, whether it's their home or wherever it is, and then they access their study materials. We are having different types of exams depending on the decisions that we have taken in particular cases. So some will be open book exams. In that case, by the way, I need to explain this thing to students, that open book exams are very interesting. The impression that might be created is that because I'll be having access to my books, then it means that I will pass, with flying colors. Unbeknown to the students, open book exams are the most difficult because you are not looking for the materials from the book, by the way. We are looking for an understanding or comprehension that the students bring to bear as and when they reflect on the subject matter.
All right. Professor Mandla Makanya there, he's the Vice Chancellor and Principal of UNISA.
Kathy Motlatlana on SAFM.
All right. Thanks to Professor Mandla Makanya there, setting the record straight in terms of UNISA. And, it's quite interesting the extent to which they are now the leader when it comes to online learning and how many institutions are relying on them to help them with their personal systems. I think it shows in many